Welcome to the first of the 5 video series that we're doing on our best tips for making local service ads successful in your business. I'm Corey Vandenberg, and I hope you find everything that we have prepared for you helpful. The first thing that I should note is the reason that we wanted to make this series is because we feel like there's a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration that we're seeing from business owners as they attempt to integrate local service ads as a part of their media mix. We hear a lot of different questions, things from what is it all the way to we've tried it, it didn't work. And in the middle, people get mixed results. Sometimes they say it's fantastic, and then all of a sudden it'll drop off a cliff and they don't know why. And I think as you start to listen to some of the things that I'm going to talk about in this series, it'll become a little bit more clear why that dropping off of a cliff tends to happen, why there tends to be ups and downs constantly with lead flow for a lot of these business owners. Now, in the introduction to this video, one of the things that I mentioned is that Google's sort of like judge, jury, and executioner. They are taking a look at all of these different variables, but they're not really describing them in great detail to the extent that they give you some guidance. It's sort of helpful, but it's taken us 2 years of playing around with this platform to really figure out what they mean by some of the success criteria that they give you for how to make local service ads work. I'm going to elaborate a little bit in this first video just on the criteria that you're being judged on. And then we'll move into deep diving on each of those different things on what you can do about them in a future video. The rules by which you're being judged, in short, are proximity, reviews, and responsiveness. You need to think about your relationship with Google as if they're in a partnership with you and your business. They're ranking you at the top of their listings. And for many, that's somewhat of an implied endorsement. And even if it's not, one thing I know for sure is that Google will not have you up there very long if the experience is poor for their client. They're not going to gamble on somebody who's getting poor reviews or ignoring their leads, which is how they get paid. They don't want that. In many respects, even though the criteria that I'm going to be talking about in this video is sometimes vague, the reality is when you get deeper into understanding what they really mean, it does make sense. Google's motivation is, if you ask them, it's first the experience of the searcher and that they get a satisfactory answer to their query. And then secondarily, they're in it to make profit too. Those two things might be switched around if you're not as charitable in your interpretation. Now, what I'm going to do is break down what that criteria is so that you have the ability to really examine what you're already doing and see to what extent you're able to really help your listing succeed by aligning yourself with the goals Google has. The first of these criteria that I'm going to talk about is proximity. Now, as I talk about them, you'll notice I have a search result that I've pulled up here on the screen. And the way I think you should think about this whole entire concept in this video is in terms of a funnel. Okay. Now, remember, this is just a mental model. I'm not telling you that I know precisely exactly how Google processes all of this or what their algorithm is. But in the last 2 years, we've had hundreds of accounts and a lot of experience, and we've seen thousands of leads go through them. And so we've got a pretty good feel for what makes an LSA listing tick. All right. With regard to proximity, the closer you are to the searcher, the higher you tend to rank. Now, that's not the only criteria. So I want you to think of it sort of like this. If proximity is the first criteria that Google is evaluating you on, and let's say that a searcher who searches for car accident lawyer Detroit, let's say that that first searcher is 1 mile away from Mike Morse Injury Law Firm. Okay. That's going to be one of the criteria. So Mike, in this case, would get a little +1 here. And that would be part of the equation that goes into determining why he ended up as one of the top two listings being shown. Now, imagine that somebody else was 10 miles away and the law firm that is, let's see here, the law firm that's 10 miles away, well, they might end up listed down here like seventh on the list. Okay. So it's important to think about each of these different things as being a piece of the puzzle that completes exactly the reasons why Google is going to rank you higher. Now, this can be affected by the next two rules. Now, if you have high marks for proximity, you can still be affected by the next two criteria and end up scoring lower and being listed lower as the next criteria that can affect how high you rank is your reviews. You'll notice here on this board that the Mike Morse Law Firm has 282 reviews compared to 310, 69, 30, 7, and 102. So clearly, it isn't merely the total number. There's other factors in play. What we've learned over dealing with thousands of these accounts is that we think Google is evaluating based on what we call internally positive review velocity. In other words, you want as many positive reviews as you can get in succession in a quick amount of time. So it depends on how many you've had historically. If you historically only get one a month, well, then getting 4 a month would do wonders for your listing. On the other hand, if you typically get 10 or 20 a month and 1 month you get 1, well, that's going to dramatically impact your listing's visibility. The other thing that we've noticed is with negative reviews, it also depends on that baseline that you've already established. If you have a lot of positive reviews coming in on a regular basis, we've noticed that a negative review may only affect your lead flow for a day or two. On the other hand, if you only get a handful a month, a negative review can sometimes limit your leads for as long as 61 days. We'll go into this 61-day number in a moment and tell you a little bit more about why that is the case and how we know about it. Finally, the third criteria is called responsiveness. And this is probably, of all three, the one that's taken us the longest to figure out and is the most vague, because Google doesn't really tell you what they mean by that, and they kind of leave it up to you to figure it out through trial and error. We, over the last 6 months, we've started working with a local service ads representative who is dedicated to our agency and helps us with all of our clients directly. So it's been nice that we no longer have to go through the trial of calling up the main support line and waiting on hold and then getting a new person every time who may or may not know more about it than you. But here's what we've been able to figure out about responsiveness. Our recommendation is that all calls coming in through local service ads should be answered in under 30 seconds by a human. The other thing that we've noticed is that if you're using a recorded greeting or a phone tree or an IVR, you will tend to have a high amount of missed calls. And this will drop the score Google gives you. They have an internal metric that they keep track of called phone lead responsiveness. Now, we don't know precisely how this is calculated, but we know that to a degree, it's at least partially connected calls divided by missed calls. And I'm sure there's something else that goes into that, because we've tried doing the math and breaking it down, and it doesn't ever come out to an exact recreation of the score that they give us. So there's something else there. But irrespective of that, one little nugget that you should know is that there's no way for us to differentiate between what I would call a legitimate missed call, where you or your team or your answering service dropped the ball versus a call that was dropped because of some other aspect, whether it be technology, the call didn't get handed off to phone forwarding, uh, or the person disconnects early. Maybe they started calling and then they realized that, you know, their food's on fire in the oven or something like that. And then life got in the way and so they hang up. Either way, that ends up being a missed call and it ends up affecting your phone lead responsiveness. Uh, there are also two types of leads that can come in. So you can have a message lead or a phone lead. In either case, it's crucial that you utilize their dashboard to respond to the leads, in the case of the message leads. Because if you think about it, you might be really responsive to that lead when they come in. So let's say you call them or you text them and you start talking to them. But if there's no record of it inside Google's dashboard where they can actually see what happened with that lead, as far as they're concerned, that was a lost lead. You did nothing with it. And they're going to charge you, but they're also going to charge you in terms of your responsiveness. And that's going to cause you to get fewer leads. Now, we're currently running a case study on a solution for this missed call issue. And if you want to know more about that, feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to tell you a little bit more about what we're seeing. And failure to meet all of these standards isn't just merely going to ding your account. It can actually have serious consequences in terms of performance. Google loosely outlines all of these guidelines that I've given you, but the biggest issue we see is that they don't really give you any insight as to how it's going to affect you. So in summary, failure to meet some of these standards and criteria that Google's using to evaluate you can negatively affect performance on your account. And as I go through this video series, I'm going to describe each of those different phases or criteria, and I'm going to break down what you can do about it specifically. Now, if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed about your local service ads, don't worry. You know, we've seen this before and you're not alone. And a lot of this really isn't your fault. Google's just terrible at designing products for actual use. Sometimes the engineers are thinking with their engineer brain, and they're not really thinking about the human experience brain and what it takes to make that a usable product. If you have been having some problems with your local service ads, we offer a free audit of your local service ads account. We'll give you a written audit back so that you have all of it, and you can go ahead and implement away and do everything that we tell you. Or if you think that it makes sense for you to have somebody pay attention to it while you run the business, that's also something that we offer. So feel free to reach out to us and fill out an inquiry, and we'll be happy to chat with you about it.